So we're going to continue with the afternoon activities. And I'd like to introduce the Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs here at LaGuardia Community College, Dr. Paul Arcario.
Thank you very much, Hugo. It's my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce CUNY's Executive Vice Chancellor, José Luis Cruz. Dr. Cruz began his tenure as Executive Vice Chancellor and University Provost in July 2019. Dr. Cruz oversees the offices of Academic Affairs, Enrollment Management, Student Affairs, and Research. Widely regarded as one of the nation's leading advocates for policies to expand opportunities and improve educational outcomes for all students, especially those who have historically been underserved, Dr. Cruz is a frequent keynote speaker and writer on higher education issues. He has testified before the United States Congress and many media news outlets, including the Chronicle of Higher Education, the New York Times, and Univision, have reported on his work. Previously, Dr. Cruz served as president of Lehman College of the City University of New York from 2016 to 2019, where he enhanced Lehman's national reputation as an engine of opportunity and made great strides towards becoming the top contributor to educational attainment in the Bronx. His former service also includes Provost of California State University, Fullerton, Vice President of Higher Education Policy and Practice at the Education Trust in Washington, D.C., and Vice President of Student Affairs for the University of Puerto Rico, for the University of Puerto Rico System. Dr. Cruz earned his bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, magna cum laude, from the University of Puerto Rico, Mayagüez, and his doctorate from the Georgia Institute of Technology. Born in Puerto Rico, Dr. Cruz spent his formative years on the island and in various cities in California, Florida, and Honduras. On a more personal note, I've had the pleasure in my capacity of LaGuardia's Provost to work closely with Executive Vice Chancellor Cruz during this past year, one we know full of so many challenges. And I am deeply grateful for his commitment to and support of LaGuardia and all of our CUNY campuses. Thank you. Dr. Cruz.
Thank you, Provost Arcario. I really appreciate your kind words and welcome everyone to this important event. I would like to thank the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Latinx, Latin American Studies programs at CUNY for inviting me to speak here today. I would also like to thank LaGuardia Community College and the organizers of today's event for all their hard work in ensuring the success of this vital and necessary convening of scholars and thinkers. It has been an emotionally charged week, to say the least. The conviction of Derek Chauvin on all 3 counts of murder was, without a doubt, a momentous legal and personal victory for the family and friends of George Floyd, and for anyone who believes in the rule of law. Indeed, the sigh of relief that we all breathed last Wednesday as we heard the word guilty 3 times over was warranted. But it was also a sign of a society that is starving for justice. And so, as relieved as we are about this week's turn of legal events, we must never lose sight of the long, demanding fight ahead to once and for all put an end to the violence against Black men, women, and children that occurs all day, every day in the United States of America. And let us not forget that as the Chauvin verdict was being read last Wednesday in Minneapolis, 800 miles away in Columbus, Ohio, a white police officer was shooting dead Ma'Khia Bryant, a 15-year-old Black girl who had reportedly called the police for help as she fled an assault. When we juxtapose these 2 stories, the delivery of a just verdict in Minneapolis and simultaneous police killing of a Black child in Ohio, it is easy to feel bewildered. For every step forward seems to portend 2 massive steps backward. We are left asking ourselves, what can we do? Of course, as individuals and as a collective, we must continue to put serious pressure on our leaders to take seriously the plague of daily violence against Black, Brown, Asian, and Indigenous people. but as scholars and researchers working within the world's most diverse university system, we know that another thing we must do is start listening. Really start listening to our students' voices. Their very valid concerns about structural racism and state-sanctioned violence and their pleas for justice. And then we must come together as a community of activist scholars to leverage the vast resources at our disposal in order to enact bold reforms that will bring about meaningful change. Change that begins at CUNY, then emanates throughout the New York community and beyond. CUNY's reaffirmed commitment to racial justice and its coinciding endeavor to expand the discipline of ethnic studies university-wide came about as a result of listening to our students, who told us that as a university, we could do better. More specifically, our students told us that the current nationwide outcry for racial justice and an end to the white supremacy that incubates brutal violence towards Black, Brown, Asian, and Indigenous people is not something that can be sated by so-called token representation in academia alone. Instead, we must not only ensure that academia and curricula look like America, but that they sound and feel like America as well, with a rich array of voices, perspectives, and lived experiences that are indispensable to the learning process, as well as to finding original solutions to combating injustice and enacting the sort of societal restructuring that is proportional to the threat of white supremacy and the colonial mindset. Through the aid of a historic $3 million gift from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, CUNY is now reimagining and further expanding the discipline of ethnic studies throughout our 25 colleges. Over the past year, the Mellon Foundation has redoubled its efforts to spread the humanities locally by funding organizations and institutions that bring a variety of histories and voices to public memorials, museums, and public events. All of this is underpinned by the Foundation's goal of furthering scholarly and artistic work that contributes to a fairer and more just society, a goal that CUNY certainly shares. With this generous support from the Mellon Foundation, CUNY will work to further the field of ethnic studies by incorporating a critical reevaluation of the Western-centric canon into its traditional humanities and social sciences, while employing an inclusive multifocal approach in its courses. To facilitate such work, CUNY, as you know, has dozens of centers and institutes dedicated to research and public outreach across disciplines that we will make sure to leverage. Institutes and centers such as the Asian American Center at Queens College, the Center for Puerto Rican Studies at Hunter College, and the Center for Black Literature at Medgar Evers College, as well as a number of university-wide entities such as the Mexican Studies Institute housed at Lehman College, the Dominican Studies Institute housed at City College, the Haitian Studies Institute housed at Brooklyn College, and the Institute for Research on the African Diaspora in the Americas and the Caribbean housed at the Graduate Center. To launch this radical initiative, the university recently convened the Ethnic Studies Planning Commission, which is comprised of CUNY faculty, staff, and students, as well as outside experts. These commission members were selected through a transparent process that involved input from hundreds of CUNY community members. The commission has now been formally charged and will specifically explore how ethnic studies and racial justice will intersect with the faculty experience, the student experience, and institutional practices across the City University of New York. The Planning Commission will continue to convene over the course of 8 months and will then deliver its recommendations as to how CUNY can best deploy its unparalleled conglomeration of faculty, staff, and resources to best reimagine ethnic studies through the lens of real anti-racist work. This expansion of ethnic studies at CUNY will be undergirded by serious research and will aim to return the discipline to its radical roots in the 1960s, when Black, Brown, and Indigenous academics sought to unchain academia from Eurocentric thinking and assign equal importance to the rich histories of these communities, thereby allowing their experiences to influence disciplines outside of the humanities, such as business, medicine, and the natural sciences. In this way, ethnic studies can continue in its intention to be disruptive to traditional thought. In closing, I offer this thought as we accept the challenge of dismantling centuries of traditional thought in academia, a challenge that, if not insurmountable, does seem imposing. It has been said that a university must reflect the soul of its people, their values, their stories, their aspirations. And I would add that a university must also empower the communities they serve and represent to have greater agency over their destinies at both an individual and collective level. The effort to supplant the colonial mindset with a more democratic way of thinking is integral to a university to fulfill its twin missions of opportunity and social advancement. As leaders in higher education during a time of historic demand for racial justice and amid a ravaging pandemic, we must accept that the task at hand will demand our time, our commitment, and our desire to be disruptive for the greater good. Thank you for all you do to advance these ideals, ideals that are manifest in the mission of the City University of New York. Thank you.
Executive Vice Chancellor. Okay, here's Rachel. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Stevenson, I'm Chief of Staff to the Executive Vice Chancellor and University Provost and Assistant Vice Chancellor for Academic Strategy and Operations. And I know there are a lot of questions that many folks have shared regarding the Planning Commission. So we thought that we might entertain a few of those questions as part of this this portion of the event. So thank you so much for creating space for this important conversation. So, we've seen a few questions come in, and I'll just reiterate what I know organizers of the event have already communicated. If you have any questions about this work now or later, please email ethnicstudies@cuny.edu. We'll be monitoring the inbox now and also responding to questions that come in after the event. So we encourage you to please keep the dialogue going. Not only can we, as supporters of this work, answer your questions, but we can also communicate with commission members and let them know what's on your mind. But the first question we thought we would talk about now is specifically regarding the charge of the Planning Committee. EVC Cruz, could you say a little more specifically about the final charge that was delivered to the commission recently?
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you for the question. The Commission has organized its work along three different dimensions: the faculty experience, institutional context, and student experience. And they have created subcommittees for each and are now in the process of defining the scope of work that will guide their efforts. As to faculty experience, the charge explicitly considers supporting future hiring, promotion, and retention of faculty in Black, race, and ethnic studies, creating more opportunities for faculty research and collaboration across CUNY, and addressing pressing issues in campus climate. Under the institutional context area, the charge includes leveraging CUNY's excellent assets, including faculty, community college, senior college, graduate and doctoral programs, master classes, centers and institutes, partnerships, and mechanisms such as ePermit that allow students to explore offerings across colleges, all with the prospect of expanding academic offerings and access to them so that students can better leverage their experience at CUNY. This also includes, of course, student development services and internships, building more robust collaboration opportunities across colleges, and rethinking and decolonizing institutional processes. And finally, on the student experiences area, the charge is really about rethinking and decolonizing the curriculum and addressing pressing issues of campus climate. So those are at a very high level, the elements of the work that the Commission is pursuing.
Thanks so much. One thing I will add, and for folks listening in, I just want to say I have the opportunity to support the work of the Commission and help to support the Commission members. And one of the things that really struck me during the charge meeting was the fact that the Chancellor in particular noted in the charge that Commission members have an opportunity to think about how to leverage the system in a really meaningful way. And, I was listening in to many sessions at last week's Faculty Diversity Conference. I imagine that many of you were participants in that event as well. And one resounding theme that kept coming up over and over is the fact that there are so many of our colleagues throughout the system doing work, but ultimately not connecting about the work and feeling like they are in silos. And so there was a real desire for coalition building. And so that really does make me think about the charge to leverage the system. And I think that the commission is well positioned to take that on at this time. Another question that's come up, because clearly in the information that you shared and also some of the information that we have included online, there's really high level language about the aspirations of this initiative in particular. Can you say more specifically what the concrete deliverables of the Planning Commission are?
Sure. So as I mentioned in my remarks, this work is being supported by the Mellon Foundation through a historic gift that aims to ensure that CUNY is leveraging at the system level, as well as at the college level, all of its assets in Black, race, and ethnic studies to benefit not only the educational experience of our students, but also to contribute to our community in terms of providing agency to them to address the issues of the day. And so the commission will be meeting over the next 8 months in subcommittees, as I've mentioned earlier, to look at different aspects or dimensions of this work, pursuing responses to the questions that they have been charged with. And the concrete product of their efforts will be recommendations to the Chancellor on how best to invest the funding from the Mellon Foundation to accelerate progress in Black, race, and ethnic studies at CUNY. So basically, when we went to the foundation and we're talking about the importance of looking very carefully at our assets and how we could best deploy them in these areas at this time in our nation's history, we were very clear, and the foundation was very supportive of the fact that it would really benefit us to hear from a commission of distinguished faculty and students from CUNY and outside as to how best to use those dollars to support the work, rather than go in with a preconceived notion of things that we could do. And so that's how we've structured the work. The first 8 months, the commission will be developing those recommendations. And once those recommendations are available, we'll be acting upon them.
Thank you. And so on this point about, the responsibility of the commission ultimately to generate recommendations, it's no surprise that we have gotten a few questions just in the past couple of minutes about how faculty, staff, and students can ultimately support the initiative. I was going to share as part of this component of the program a little more information about how the commission is organizing its work, and happy to do that. But I wonder, EBC Cruz, if you have anything to say specifically about engagement over the course of the next 8 months before I give more details about next steps.
Sure. So just at a very general level, when the Chancellor was in the charging committee meeting with the committee and talked about leveraging the system to ensure that we can best support this important work, one of the themes that was discussed was the commission's ability to interact directly with our campus communities to inform their work. So the commission members themselves, through their committees, are currently evaluating or developing the scope of their work, and as well as how they will interact and gather information and provide opportunities for the broader campus community to inform it. So that's at a very high level. Rachel, if you'd like to provide more information, that'd be great.
Excellent. The only thing I would add is that I think it's clear at this point that the 3 subcommittees that have been formed are aligned with the 3 components of the charge we've discussed: faculty experience, institutional context, and student experience. And yes, I mean, there's a conversation happening now about what the work over the next 8 months will look like, specifically how Planning Commission members are going to convene and collaborate, and how the questions that have been posed to the commission can ultimately be narrowed so that they can focus their inquiry and efforts, strategically as the work unfolds. Now, stakeholder engagement has come up over and over among commission members is very important. And so, as EVC Cruz noted, there are some conversations happening now about the work plans for implementing various stakeholder surveys, potentially organizing campus-based meetings, and also making requests of the Office of Institutional Research to just build some real knowledge about the landscape, the university landscape, that would be helpful. Now, again, I would encourage folks who really want to be a part of this conversation to please email ethnicstudies@cuny.edu. We are monitoring that inbox regularly and ultimately passing on information to commission members. So that is a way to have a direct line to the work, and our office will be sure that that information is shared. So let's see. I don't see that any other questions have come in. I think we've covered.
Rachel.
Yep.
There's actually a question that came in through the internal Q&A, which I made available to you in the panelist chat, if you'd like to take a look at it.
Excellent. Yes. Okay. So here's a question. It says, Dr. Cruz, please clarify your use of the conceptual framework of decolonizing the curriculum in connection with Puerto Rican studies.
Thank you for the question. I think broadly, not just for Puerto Rican studies, but more broadly, when we talk about decolonizing the curriculum, it's not only about ensuring that the voices of the historically underserved or colonized are represented in course syllabi and in our academic programs more generally, but also that there is the right balance, if you will, in that representation with respect to sort of the dominating voices that have been in play for centuries in academia. So that's really a conversation that through the commission, we hope will be fleshed out as to what that means in the context of CUNY and the programs that are in place and our faculty governance structures. But we very much look forward to getting some traction in that area.
I do see another question. There's a line of questioning around how CUNY campuses who don't yet have ethnic studies programs ultimately receive help for this effort from the initiative.
And that's one of the key questions that the commission is going to be wrestling with. It's how do we, with the resources we do have available, make sure that they're more widely accessible across the system, and identifying gaps where we may need not only to think about the funding, how to deploy the funding from the Mellon grant, but also perhaps do some institutional reallocations and more targeted philanthropic and government support requests. So that's something that the commission is looking directly at.
All right. Well, thanks again for this opportunity, and just want to encourage everyone to stay connected to the work. Please do reach out with any questions or concerns.
Thank you, everyone.